Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks.
What up, y'all? This is Antonio Moore coming to you from Tone Talks. I'm here to have a great discussion today about black wealth, about white wealth, a powerful discussion about a new report that just came out. It just came out actually this week, and I have one of the authors on. Now, I have to give full disclosure. He's one of my friends. He's actually an editor at inequality.org that I've worked with on a number of articles. Chuck, you want to say hello to the audience?
Hey, great to be with you and your audience, and thank you for all you've done to get these conversations rolling to a new level.
I look forward to having a great discussion. We here on Dash Radio, Dash Talk X. We also on YouTube streaming live. Support on the super chat with this channel. Spread this message. We about to have a good discussion. We gonna dig into black wealth and white wealth and what it's been doing, and this new report that just came out. You know, we have Chuck Collins on, senior scholar at the Institute for Policy Studies, editor of inequality.org, author of so many books. We gonna get to talk about his most recent and towards the end of the discussion. Make sure y'all pick it up. But what we talking about right now is this new report that just came out this week. A powerful piece that adds to the discussion about inequality that we've been having, that Professor Darity, Professor Hamilton, Chuck Collins, Thomas Shapiro, that we've been having, that now seems to be making its way into the senators' offices. We got Elizabeth Warren, we got Cory Booker, we got Bernie Sanders. Everybody's talking race and wealth. Nobody was talking race and wealth 2 or 3 years ago. You know what I'm saying, Chuck?
Yep. So,
look, we do this by questions, and I just want to bring the questions in right now, and I want to have this discussion about wealth inequality in America, about how we move forward. And I think for a lot of us, that's kind of difficult, because what we've seen is that race, wealth, it's been a hard topic to deal with, because so many of us want to kind of hide under the covers and say that was in the past, but it's not in the past. I have a set of questions. We do this by questions, and I'm gonna start off by just going through those. Then I'm gonna go right to the author of this new report, and we're gonna dig right in. So number one is we got this new report, Deferred, how enriching the 1% widens the wealth divide. It follows the report that they put out, I believe, last year, or the Zero Wealth Report. Everybody heard about that Zero Wealth Report. It basically said that by 2053, black families won't have much wealth at all. You know, we're gonna get into that, and we're gonna explain some of the methodology and the background and how Chuck got to that. Number two is talking millionaires. We're gonna discuss how many are there. You know, I've discussed it with you. Me and Matt Brunig got the micro data out, and Chuck Collins and his crew used some of this data inside of this new report, and we're gonna talk about that. Number three, what's the consequence of moving toward nearly no black wealth? What does that look like? What does a world look like where there are no black, like, wealthy families, or the middle black families at zero? Let's try to, like, imagine that world. Number four, the IPS report, like many analysis, includes Latinos as a third group. Does this create a false narrative around race and wealth? Because when we talk about black wealth, we're talking about Jim Crow that made black people a contagion to wealth, that America did by law. Whereas with Latino wealth, we're actually just talking about just being poor and coming from a poor country into America. Well, if that's the case, we might as well have Yugoslavians. We might as well have all kind of South America. We might as well have everybody have a space. So what's the consequence, and how did we get here where it's black, white, and brown wealth? We're gonna talk about the solutions. You know, you got Ocasio talking about a 70% tax. You got reparations discussion starting. Darity has written the report, on the 21st century. We gonna talk about it today. But Chuck, can you say hello to the audience and just give them a little background on what made you do this newest report?
Well, thanks for having me, Antonio, and again, thank you for your own writing, your own probing analysis, and the friendships and relationships you've built with scholars in this space. I think you're a good networker, and I appreciate that. And I should say, we've done, probably for the last 15 years, I've been doing reports, often with my long-term colleague Diedrich Muhammad, looking at these issues of race and wealth, because I think it tells a deeper, more powerful story about history, the legacy of white supremacy, and how it affects wealth building. And so we've been tracking it for like 15 years. And the bad news is we're not making we're not closing the gap. In fact, it's been widening really over the last 30 years, in part because of these overall inequality trends, and partly because the unique history of the black wealth experience. So to me, it's one of the most important discussions we're not having. I agree, it's starting to happen more. People are starting to engage with it, but we have a long way to go in terms of really facing the facts as a society.
So let's get right into some of the key findings from your report. I'm going to read some of those for everyone. Dreams Deferred, How Enriching the 1% Widens the Racial Wealth Divide. The key findings include between 1983 and 2016, the median black family saw their wealth drop over 50% after adjusting for inflation, while over that same period, median white wealth increased by 33%. Number two, the median black family today owns $3,600, just 2% of the wealth of the $147,000 the median white family owns, meaning the middle family. The middle Latino family has assets worth $6,600, just 4% as much as the median white family. We'll discuss that in a second. The next one is, if the trajectory of the past 3 decades continues, by 2050, median white wealth will be $174,000, while Latino wealth will be $8,600, and median black wealth will be $600. So that's the future. The next one is the proportion of all U.S. wealth households with zero or negative wealth, meaning their debts exceed the value of their assets, has grown from 1 in 6 in 1983, to 1 in 5 in 2016. Families of color are much likelier to be in this precarious financial situation. 37% of black families and 33% of Latino families have zero or negative wealth. You guys have seen the chart that I had Matt Brunig actually do, where it shows that the bottom half of the race, if you took all of their wealth and combined it, doesn't really even have a dollar together. It's basically, meaning African Americans. The widening of the racial wealth divide has coincided with the extreme concentration of U.S. wealth. The Forbes 400 richest Americans own more wealth than the entire black population, plus a quarter of the Latino population in addition to that. I mean, these are crazy numbers. When you start dealing with the consequence of this kind of aggregation of wealth, this kind of aggregation of wealth within race, you start really having to deal with the long history this country has. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, owns $160 billion in total wealth. This is 44 million times more wealth than the median black family. Low levels of black and Latino wealth, combined with the growing proportion of the population, is a key factor in the decline in overall American median household. Chuck, is there anything that particular jumps out of you from these key findings that you wanted to speak on?
Well, I think a lot of those facts stand powerfully for themselves, but I do think that the point you made about just the high percentage of households that have no cushion, nothing to fall back on, or negative wealth, and just how that affects people's sense of well-being. And it's fascinating right now with this partial government shutdown that we're starting to hear stories of people who, these are government employees with jobs who got their last paycheck on December 22nd, and now they are at the food pantry. They're at the soup kitchen. And we're seeing, these are people living paycheck to paycheck, and these are people who have jobs, and they're not alone. The government shutdown has been lasting, has shut down a huge part of the economy for a lot of other people too. As you say, really half the population with negligible savings and wealth. And so I would say at this moment, that to me just leaps out. It's not just, furloughed government employees. It's a huge percentage of the population that's living close to the edge and feeling that vulnerability. And maybe this is a moment where more people are understanding that and experiencing some empathy about that.
So let's get right into the causation. I don't know how much we dealt with that in your report, but I started really thinking about this in context of the Obama presidency. I know oftentimes, economists don't want to get political, but when we start looking at this thing, in my view, and you're welcome to give your pushback or your opinion in support or not, In my view, President Barack Obama, in one hand, led to, as Jacobin put it, a destruction of black wealth through not supporting homeowners. Because the primary asset of black, even the black wealthy, the few blacks that have any wealth, which is, you know, the top 5, top 10%, was residential property and additional property. So when the market collapsed and he supported the banks over the homeowners, it significantly impacted black wealth. And so on the other hand, he also did quantitative easing, which led to this boom in the stock market, and blacks don't have much stock, but white people do. And it led to this increase of white millionaires like we had never seen in this country. You know, by some accounts, I saw that no other country come close to the U.S. number of millionaires, which hit 17 million in 2018, up from 4.5 million in 2015. So we increased by 13 million millionaires in just 3 years. 13 million more millionaires in just 3 years, pretty much all white people. And I guess, what is your opinion on the causation?
Well, I think that is really the story, especially in the last 10 years, where coming out of the economic meltdown, you know, most black wealth is in the form of home equity, and white wealth is more diversified and is in capital and investments. So if you rig the rules to the economy to, you know, keep home ownership down and boost asset prices, you're going to help the people who already own a lot of assets, and that in that case was white families. So it's almost like you're hitting the accelerator for one group of people and hitting the brake for another group of people. And so, especially since 2008, I would say that's the more recent chapter of the story.
So what happened in 2008? We elected the first African American president by everyone's account. So under the first African American president, we saw massive destruction of black wealth and a massive creation of almost like this new, like, calcified white upper class. And I don't think everybody really understands the consequence of that on their lives, on their families' lives going forward, in terms of what you'll be able to achieve, objectives, goals, everything else. And you came out with the report last year, and I'll let you talk about that for a second as well, the road to zero wealth. And it went crazy when you predicted that by 2053, that basically the middle black family will be worth nothing. Can you tell us how you got that methodology and what made you put that out?
Well, we were looking at the survey of consumer finance data in 2013, and we were kind of looking at the trajectory since 1983, which is, you know, when we first get the kind of good data we needed. And one thing you and I agree on is you do take out durable goods. You take out cars and appliances and things that really don't hold their value, or certainly can't be liquidated to recover the value. So we get the real bare bones, you know, what is it that people have in terms of savings and home equity, wealth that they can actually get their hands on. And in that trajectory, we saw that, you know, the median, that's the black family in the middle, would, you know, within a fairly short couple of decades, hit zero. Then in this report, we incorporated the data from 2016, and actually between 2013 and 2016, there was a very modest increase in black wealth and in wealth overall for other groups. But, you know, in the overall picture, it was very, very small, but that changed the trajectory just a little bit. We're still looking at, you know, the road to zero wealth is now, you know, 2080. You know, it's still, you know, we're still heading downhill. And you ask, you know, what does that mean? That's half the population. That means that, you know, anybody, you know, below that point is probably in the negative, owing more than they own, and the vulnerability that comes with that. So that's, you know, that's kind of the moment we're in.
And let me say a couple things. I think that you know, I've worked with Matt Brunig, and to me, shout out to Matt in the sense of his ability to take the micro data and squeeze it and create all kind of charts. Used to be at demos, and we did an article together on Millionaires, which I'll discuss in a second, because then the Washington Post actually came out 3 days later, and that's, you guys used the Washington Post article, but I want to talk about the number of black millionaires and white millionaires. But before I get there, you know, Edward Wolf came out with this lack of durable good calculation. That's kind of where it started. And I think it's still at about 1,700, 1,800 when you take everything out. But if you just take out the car, then it drops to for black families at like 4,000. What's interesting about white families is it goes like it doesn't really adjust their number because their number is at 130, 140. Plus they inherit cars and clothes and everything else, and it just exposes so much of the difference in how white people and black people live in the middle in this country. And I think that for a lot of us, we live in the same space but have no awareness of the difference in our lives, the transfers that are going on, the kind of gifts that are going on that make first-class American life, first-world American life possible for so many white folks. And I guess I wanted to just ask you a little bit about your background. You talk about it, I believe, in your new book, and it's such an interesting and fascinating story, and how you got here to talk about inequality.
Yeah, I mean, I'm white. My great grandfather was the meat packer Oscar Mayer. So, anybody here who ever had an Oscar Mayer hot dog or bologna, that was my family. That's my great grandfather, and so here I am. I'm actually 4 generations of economic stability. There's a company that started in Chicago in 1885, and what I have learned is just how white wealth works. First of all, my great grandfather built his business in an ethnic German, kind of immigrant enclave where his
one second,
customers
Chuck. 1 second. I'm sorry. You said your great grandfather is Oscar Mayer, the actual man that's on the package. Just making sure for the audience.
That's right. I mean, there's no picture of him, but that's the name. That's my great-grandfather, and he came from Bavaria, Germany, with an 8th grade education, but he also married a woman who had a family dowry that helped provide working capital so he could, instead of being an employee in the butcher shop, he could buy the butcher shop and, over several generations, build this very successful brand. But I like to sometimes put my family wealth history alongside some of my friends same age, with maybe even the same income as me, who are African American, and we can kind of look back and say, okay, well, what was your family doing in 1884?
Come on.
Even people who had family businesses, often black business districts were subject to pogroms. That wasn't happening in the German immigrant community. When you have wealth over multiple generations, you do what you were just implying. You help your kids. So there are all these intergenerational transfers of wealth. We help you go to college. We help you buy a house. If you have a mental illness or an addiction, we're like a family safety net. We can smooth out the bumps that inevitably people experience. We can help you buy your first car. We can enable you to get the training so you can get a good-paying job as opposed to, working while you're getting your schooling and being stretched, all these, 1,000 different ways in which wealthy and even just affluent white families can help their children get ahead. And I just think we completely underestimate sort of the multi-generational ways advantage works and how people help their kids. And, and then, everybody sort of pretends like we're all just starting off at the same starting line, today, and particularly when we talk about wealth, that's where you see this multi-generational wind at your back experience for many whites.
So, and what's a trip is this. Let me say 2 things. The first thing that seems to be happening right now is we're moving from an era where that was a bonus, meaning this assistance, to that's required if you want to make a highly functional child. That's what wealth calcification does. Thomas Piketty quoted as saying that America in its current state has among the highest wealth inequality we've ever seen anywhere. I don't think anybody and to be black inside of that, and when I say black, I'm not talking about like being black globally, like in coming here. I'm talking about coming from a lineage of Jim Crow and slavery inside of this country and being a contagion to wealth and carrying that burden in your family. To be from that in the middle of this era, I don't think everybody understands that consequence until it's right upon them. And then they tell themselves, well, white people go through this too. And we have to push back because, as I've shown with Darity and Hamilton in our report, the bottom quintile of white families still are worth $10,000. The bottom quintile.
Yeah.
So you have the bottom of white families being an equivalent in wealth to the middle of black families in basic sense, if not more. And so I'm looking at this narrative, and I think also what's happening is inside of Black America, there's also an intra-race wealth difference that nobody really talks about. I showed in The Decadent Veil that there was a 74-time multiplier between the middle white family and the upper 1% white family in terms of income. But when you got over to black families, it was multiple hundreds of times. And between the middle black family and the black family and the 1%. Now, they didn't make as much as the white family, but they made tons more times than the middle black family. So you have the Valerie Jarretts, you have the Oprah Winfreys, you have these figures, but then you have the reality of a Black America that has literally no wealth. And when you look at this across deciles, what you see is that of the 20 million black families, 2 million control 75% of the little wealth that blacks have. So blacks have 2.6% of the wealth. Almost 2% of that 2.6 is in the hands of the top 10% of black families, primarily like boomers. So the bottom 90% is living on nearly no wealth of black families. These are people that went to college and have student debt and will likely never pay it off. And I don't think that America or black families in America are being honest about that. The consequence of that. We don't have to wait till 2053. We here now, right now. That's why when you leave UCLA, you drive an Uber. You had, I believe it was Elijah Cummings' daughter. She leaves Howard, Elijah Cummings' daughter, congressman, and she's driving Lyft or Uber using congressional plates. I don't know how often that happens for white folks. You know what I'm saying, Chuck?
Totally.
Go ahead.
Here's an interesting part of that story. I think what you're talking about is very important. In the last 40 years, we've basically seen wealth for those who already had wealth kind of get supercharged and everyone else left behind. So the new physics of inequality is compounding or accelerating advantage for people at the top, say the top 10%, top 15%, and then accelerating a disadvantage for everyone else. So if you were in that very small segment of African Americans who had wealth going into late 1970s, early 80s, or you got, you hit the lottery through an enterprise, through business or, through a film company or whatever, you made that leap into the multiplying asset class. But if you depended on work and wages, and then you lost ground. So I think it's complicated because here we are in this time where you also have half the population of whites who have not seen their real wages go up in 40 years, and people are focused on their current pain. So they're saying, "Hey, I'm not doing well." We're not looking at the 400-year story of white supremacy and the interruption and destruction of black wealth. We're just looking at the last couple decades.
And also, Chuck, I had this push with Richard Rothstein, Color of Law. A big part of it is black celebrity and the apathy that's left behind as a result of black celebrity. You have a whole generation of white folks that were raised watching The Cosby Show. Let's call it what it is. And you guys have doctors and lawyers too. You have Oprah and you had a president. And so we don't deal with the fact that the president created white wealth and destroyed black wealth. We don't deal with the fact that The Cosby Show was, in fact, when you look at it in terms of the Color of Law book, fantastical, because the home was worth $700,000 when they bought it in '83, and a black family likely would have been covenants to not allow them in the neighborhood. But we just look at that and we learn about race without learning about the reality of what race was doing at that time. Maybe a black family would have been able to buy a $100,000 home, and that's still a stretch in '83. But for a $700,000 home, you'd have had to have Oscar Mayer as your granddaddy. I'm just calling it straight, because somebody had to put $150,000 down in '80s money, and that's a whole different ball game. $150,000 might as well be $1 million in 1983. So I say all that to say that we have a whole slew of young boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials that didn't really understand or learn race in the right way. That's my theory.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, they look at Kobe Bryant and LeBron James. They look at the the Jay-Z, the Puff Daddy, and they feel, well, black people have some wealth as well. So let's get right into it and talk about millionaires. You know, one of the things that I wanted Matt Brunig to do when the new data came out, which is the most recent survey of consumer finances from the Federal Reserve, is tell me, Matt, how many millionaires there are. And when we did an article together on his new site, Public Policy Project, the People's Policy Project, I apologize. And what we showed is that of the 83 to 85 million white homes, a full 15% are worth $1.2 million or more. 15% of the race. Now, in addition, almost 1 million families, white families, are worth over $10 million. While you look over at black families, there's 20 million black homes, and only 380,000 or so broke $1 million. That's it. And we're talking most of them at probably 1.2, 1.4, 1.5. So you literally can have a grandma over on Vermont and like 83rd or something like that, and she can have 2 houses because her husband left her 2 houses, and she can have let's say a rental property, and she got 80,000 in the bank, and she's in that 380,000 black families. And I don't think we really understand the reality of the picture of black wealth from media versus the reality of not having really any black wealth and the consequence of that. So you want to speak to like how to what you guys saw with the millionaires? Because I saw that you guys used the Washington Post article.
Yeah, and it's a great fact that you found. First of all, most people have no idea 15% of white households have net worth, as you say, over $1.2 million. That is a much higher percentage. In fact, it's the same percentage of whites that have zero or negative wealth.
Come on.
And that was one of the points we sort of pointed out was like, a black family, it's going to be 20 times more likely to have zero or negative wealth than they're going to have $1 million in assets, meaning it's, less than 2%, whereas 37% of black families, zero or negative wealth. So that's,
And let's point out one more thing, Chuck. Let's point out one more thing that's powerful as heck. The first thing is what you see is that if you are in that white group that's in the top 15%, your whole family is. So that means you don't have family in the zero wealth part. But for black families, you might be at one of the 380,000 and your whole family has no wealth. So now this little bit of wealth that you do have is an albatross because everybody comes to you as government because they don't have any wealth. You look at Trump. Trump has failed many times over. The sister saved him. The daddy saved him because that's how wealth moves. Now, the other fact is just as important. This white wealth is growing. We just passed one of the most regressive tax reform bills in American history. And I ask you today, what will tax reform do to the white millionaire class that we just saw go from 4.5 million people to 17 million before tax reform? What will it do?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be $1 trillion mostly to people in that top 1% group. So it's kind of continuing that same trend of the last 40 years. We're going to keep compounding the wealth of the very top. That tiny, tiny segment is going to get almost all the gains. And it's going to create these deficits. And in 3 years, we're going to hear Republicans howling again about, we've living beyond our means, and et cetera. We need to cut, investments in home ownership. We need to privatize the post office. And if you look at all that stuff through a racial lens, it's like we're going to essentially destroy stable middle-class jobs that also employ a lot of people of color. Unfortunately, that's our 40-year trend, and it obviously doesn't have to be this way.
Now, let me say something else, Chuck. What's a trip is you got white Americans that are in the middle, worth almost $140,000. Understand to reach a family worth $140,000 in Black America, I think you got to get to like the 20th percentile family. You got to be in the top 20% of Black families. I mean, exceedingly high, and pretty much still all boomers. All boomers.
Yes.
Unless you're boomer hooked, and you guys that have watched my show know that's a term I have coined. for people that are essentially hooked to their boomer parents, but then project as though this is an individual achievement. And this isn't just black families. This is Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, but this is in black America particularly problematic because they overrepresent in terms of the successful group, the group that gets to go on CNN and speak for black America, but they don't understand that black America didn't have their gifts and advantages. But nonetheless, coming back to my point, what we see right now is we see this calcification, and we see a dishonesty around this calcification, and we see this white wealth growing. And I just have to wonder, as I look at this third question, what the consequence of this is going to be moving forward. Before I do that, this is Dash Radio, Dash Talk X. Call in 323-230-4610. I want to give you a chance to speak to me and Chuck and talk about what you think the consequence of this is going to be going forward. But let me speak to it first, and I'll give you a chance as well, Chuck. You know, what I think the consequence is going to be is that there's going to be a caste system in America. We've long had one, but just not been honest about it. But it might get worse, and we're going to see massive opportunity blocks for many people, but particularly for black folk. Meaning the middle white family, and we talked about this in terms of Roseanne's show versus Scandal and Blackish. You know, Roseanne represented the middle family, but when they showed the house was only worth $120 in real world terms. But like Blackish, they had to show us a $1 million family and say that's the middle black family and call it wish fulfillment TV. What I think is going to happen is that for black America, they're going to have to confront the reality of not having wealth, but they're still going to have all the dreams. So because you were sold wish fulfillment TV, you're going to have to send your kid to Spelman because that's what you've been preparing them for, but you have none of the wealth. And so at that moment, you guys are going to have a fallout. You and your kid, or you and your mom, or whoever you promised things to. And I'm just saying to you right now, one of the objects of my project, both on as I write on inequality.org or the Griot, my show that I do, is to let you know that it's okay that you're struggling. It was built this way. Now, I'm not saying I have the answer to get you out of this, but I'm telling you right now, tax reform just passed, and it's going to get worse, not better. We have no policy in place that shows any sign of making this better. What's your thoughts, Chuck?
No, I agree with your assessment. I mean, basically, we're on track to become kind of a economic and racial apartheid caste society. One of the dynamics, and you alluded to this, is, you know, affluent and wealthy families are helping their kids, and now they have an oversized role in essentially hedging the downward mobility of the next generation. So there's a lucky segment, and you call them boomer hooked, and you know, there's a very small segment of them that are black. They're mostly white, and they're using every tool they can to help their kids. And there's a terrific book, Dream Hoarders,
yes, sir,
which sort of looks at this phenomena. You know, like they're like it's incumbency protection for the affluent.
He went further, Chuck. He went further. What he said is that you cannot access the American dream if you don't have you're not in the top 20% of America. Top 20% of America is $800,000 in net worth. Understand this, Chuck. Let's talk numbers, because that's what we do on my show. To be in the top 5% of black families, all you need is $350 in net worth. So what number do you have to get to get to 800,000? You're probably talking top 1% of black families. So only 1% of black families that are almost all boomers, that are retirees, that got lucky in a window, are the only ones that can access the American dream that are black. This is insane.
And they're the only ones who can help their kids, you know, graduate from college without debt, do unpaid internships in their field that are going to help them hedge against the competition, if you will. So that's that calcification that you described. This is how it sort of gets reinforced. And I think as your listeners listen, you know, sometimes it feels like, okay, we're up against a system. How do you crack that? I think we all have some agency here, but we have to understand it's a system, and these are a centuries-old system that we're working and organizing against, and we're not individually going to find, you know, our fancy jujitsu moves and get through this on our own individually. We're going to have to, you know, come together and organize to change the rules. That's really the only way we're going to move this along.
Again, Dash Radio, Dash Talk X, 323-230-4610. We want to hear from you. I see you guys in the box. We got almost 700, 800 people live on YouTube. We got millions streaming live across Dash Radio, Dash Talk X. Please use the super chat in the discussion. Support this channel. But what's interesting about this whole dynamic is the belief that a raft can get you through a monsoon. A raft can't get you through no monsoon. And what I think is interesting about what you just said about a system is that the system is telling us what it's going to do right now. The system has already spoken. What Trump passed in terms of tax reform was so regressive. It was so what it did with estate tax, what it did in so many different ways to basically create a new wealth class is just, it should enrage Black America and white America also. Let me take this first caller of the night. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yorktown, Virginia, Tom.
Hey, how you doing? Who am I speaking to right now?
You're talking to Otis, man. I want to ask you a question.
Yes, Otis, go ahead.
Do you think these reverse mortgages for the people that are on the bottom is how they're raking in the rest of what little wealth we have in our community?
Well, let me say this. I haven't ever had to apply for a reverse mortgage. Haven't been in that position, but I think that overall they haven't been good things for us. I think when Reagan, as I understand it, brought those about, it changed the dynamic of what a house was. It used to be that a house was something you bought and that's it. It's just your house. But when Reagan introduced that, it changed everything because now schools can charge more because they know you can pull out of that house without selling it. And now all of a sudden, society at large can start banking on the fact that you have this large amount of money over there that you can pull out of and actually pay cash on certain things for it. But what it did for Black folks is locked us out, especially Black folks that didn't have the ability to reverse mortgage anything. What are your thoughts, Chuck?
Well, no, I think it's something that we just have to realize. A huge amount of Black wealth has been lost through various forms of mortgage predation. And including this right now, the thing to watch for are these contract for deed. I wouldn't even call them a mortgage. They're contract for deed arrangements. A lot of people are frozen out of traditional financing, and so they get, but they can buy a house supposedly. But here's the deal: you enter into a contract. You have to make the payments. If you miss a payment, you lose the house. You don't actually get the deed till you make the last payment. That form of predation is back, and it's we thought we'd sort of snuffed it out.
We really did.
70s.
Wasn't that mentioned in Ta-Nehisi Coates' piece? I think that's what he starts off the whole piece with, something similar to that. Yeah. In the case for reparations.
Yeah, and the Contract Buyers League in Chicago was a great example of that. They organized to try to get rid of those mortgages. And then lo and behold, in the last 2 years, all these big private equity funds that bought up all those foreclosed buildings all over the country, they're not renting them. They're not selling them. They are entering into contract for deeds with low-income buyers. Same old bad arrangement, And it's just, again, it's another consequence of the fact that people aren't able to access traditional bank financing or traditional, even public financing mortgages, and so they're pushed into this predatory market. So it's another wealth stripping mechanism. And Antonio, that's how. Ta-Nehisi Coates, in his terrific piece about reparations, tells that that's like recent history. That's 60s and 70s, really.
We might as well say it's yesterday for some Black folks out there. Otis, anything you want to say to the audience?
Oh, no, I was just looking at the volume that's involved because I've been in construction for decades, and what it looks like to me is you don't get to have any heired property anymore, so even the idea of passing on $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 to your family once you pass is gone, because you've taken the equity out of the houses you're living. That's all I want to say. Great work you're doing, too, Tone. Appreciate it.
Otis, you can't leave my show with that. Come on. Give us an opinion on this Black wealth. What do you think about Black wealth and this new report that just came out? I know you done read it, because Otis don't not read anything. What do you think about what's going on with Black wealth versus white wealth?
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. I just don't understand how it got so many college graduates that don't understand what you're saying is fact. I'm not understanding how people are caught up in emotion and don't want to accept the facts that you two are putting out. You and Yvette have been instrumental in really pushing this, and I don't understand why they don't get it.
Thank you so much, Otis. I'm going to take the next caller. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Me?
Your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, my name is Lucas, and I'm calling from New York City.
You want to speak on this topic? What do you think that is the consequence of blacks going to zero wealth is going to be?
I don't really know. Tone and you and Yvette are probably like the smartest people on this topic, and definitely you guys are doing a great job. I called to say something that's a little bit different from what you might have heard, and been wanting to say it. What you're asking for is great. It's not as complex as what you guys are thinking, and I don't mean to take away from your work. What I mean is they're going to give you both, you and Yvette, what you want.
Who is they?
The government.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
It seems like that's who you're asking.
Go ahead, continue on.
Huh?
Continue on. I just didn't know when you said they're going to give it to you, but continue with
the both of you are brilliant. You know what you're doing. You're very well spoken. They know it has to be done. They're going to give it to you because, and I love everybody, but whatever you ask white people for, they give it to you. They're not going to deny you what you're asking for. You're not going to get it tomorrow. You're not going to get it next week. But when you go to ask for it, you're going to be well prepared, and they're already setting themselves up to prepare for your conversation, to prepare for the psychology that'll be around it. So I just want to add that that's something that you should be aware of. They're going to give you what you're asking for because they know it has to be done. They're already talking about it right now. They're already, even this guy who's on the phone with you right now, they already know that this has to be done. Even politicians who are black who are against reparations or repairing this problem, they have the solutions, but you and Yvette are coming out to enforce it. And they already know it's there, and they're not trying to get rid of black people.
Look,
not yet, caller. And maybe not never.
Let me say this. I got to keep on going because I got a couple more questions I want to get to.
I can dig it.
I appreciate you calling.
Yeah, you guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller.
Thanks, Lucas.
Caller, what's your name? Where you calling from? I guess we lost that person. Let me take him again. Caller, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, what's going on? It's Harlan calling from Phoenix.
Thank you so much for calling. Let me set up this next question. Before I set up the next question, I gotta kind of give a answer to the last caller. The history of this country isn't white folks giving us what we want. Ta-Nehisi Coates did an interview with Rothstein that I found the most interesting part was when he talked about how black folks actually got, one, free from slavery, and two, civil rights, and how the backdrop was this global perception of America. It wasn't necessarily we want to do stuff for black folks. So, you have when the civil rights is right timed with Russia and the view of America, we're trying to push this image of America being the home of the free. So it isn't just history of white folks doing great work for black folks. So the idea that they're just going to give us what we want, that they're just going to take care of us, nothing supports that. You tell me how we got tax reform passed in. I think we got to start getting honest about the policy that's in front of us. Now, if a new deal had just been passed, if we were on the verge of a new deal being discussed, I would be with you. But what we talking about is baby bonds right now. And I commend Dark Hamilton and Sandy Darity for baby bonds, but it's not a race-based solution, and that won't be reparations. We're not in the middle of a discussion about reparations. We haven't even dealt with the fact that reparations would only go to American DOS, which is not black folks in general. We're nowhere near where we need to be, so we need to continue to fight. So let me get to the question. I'm going to bring you along with me, caller, and Chuck is with me as well. And what I want to deal with is, the IPS report, like many other analysis, it includes Latinos as a third group. And I believe, when we did our report, we focused, meaning our report with Sandy Darity that's on the Duke website, with Ann Price and Dark Hamilton, we focused on blacks and whites. We had some Latino numbers in there because you have to, because that's the way data is presented, but generally focused on black and white contrast. I personally believe it's a disservice to a discussion about race and wealth in America to include Latinos, because their poverty was not created by a Jim Crow slavery system that basically combined private and public action by America and by Americans to create black people to be poor. their wealth and their poverty is actually created by a whole different set of issues. So when we talk about the gap, when we talk about the numbers, we're also talking about why those numbers exist. But by including Latino numbers, it makes the black numbers feel a little bit better, like structurally. That's my belief. What's your thoughts, Chuck?
Well, I think your important point here is there are very different historical dynamics. You know, the story of black wealth and is really the legacy of 400 years of white supremacy and wealth building. It's a very different story than first-generation Latino immigrants from Mexico or from Dominican Republic, or similar to Haitians and the Caribbeans. It probably does keep us from focusing on the bigger solutions, really, the reparations discussion, which we really have to move further along. So maybe it is a distraction. I think part of my thinking is, well, you do want to understand Black and Latino wealth, and particularly in the history of the West, Chicana wealth, and there are some experiences. Certainly, the legacy of mortgage discrimination in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. That's the more recent chapter, but it does not deny that we really have to grapple with the multi-generational impact of Jim Crow and those forces. And
Caller, I'm gonna come to you right now, but what's interesting is Yvette Carnell did a critique of Michelle Alexander recently, discussed a recent discussion she had with a Latino man on the stage, and during the time that blacks were actually shut out by covenants, his grandmother was able to buy a house anyway. So it's this fundamental question of were Latinos even treated as white people? Now, the ones that even were here, and then there's this additional reality that I saw when you look at it. It kind of reflected in your numbers. Latino numbers were actually increasing. We saw that in your report, that while black people were actually decreasing and doing worse, black people that have been here 400 years, the Latino numbers are going up. And I've actually dealt with a number of things that I think part of the issue is that black people are locked into America, DOS. Whereas when you talk about Latinos, I was in Tijuana less than 2 months ago for dental work. I was in Tijuana on election day in 2016. What's interesting is you don't understand that you can take, a low-level salary here and take it to Mexico, and actually that becomes actually a good middle wage amount of money. And there's this whole nother dynamic of the unfairness of comparing a group that is locked into America versus a group that isn't. And that's a whole discussion. I don't want to hold it, but caller, give me your opinion.
Well, I mean, I've seen the Latinos and immigrants come to this country and climb out of poverty in ways that we can't, in what appears to be ways that seemingly white supremacy did not have its boot on it. I've seen the Haitians, the Ghanaians, Eastern Europeans, Mexicans live together, pool their resources together, and in 10 years pull themselves out of poverty. So I think we have a particular type of residue that's left from the past 400 years that doesn't allow us in mass numbers, right? We have some pockets of success where we're able to do those things. But, I'll give you an extreme example. I dated a nurse in Boston. She never made any more than $11 an hour. I mean, she wasn't a nurse. She was a nanny. And she was exporting cars to Ghana.
It's a whole nother life. It's a whole nother life when you got a second country. And somebody in the chat, and I love watching the chat. I'm watching y'all. How can Latinos climb out of poverty? They're poor too. Let me say this. This is a data from Wealth Insight. It predicts that by 2017, this is an older piece of information, the number of millionaires in Mexico will grow by 47% to reach 213,000 millionaires and 3,700 multimillionaires. So how many Latinos come to America with wealth, and they're just included in the minority group? That's a whole nother thing that we don't even deal with. Like there's so much that people just don't even understand. They almost think of Mexico as a barren land country. No, since NAFTA, they've developed so much. When I was in Tijuana, you know, it's funny, they did a lot of construction on the Mexican side of the border. And I'm asking my dentist, I said, wow, that's a lot of construction. Who's paying for it? He said Obama. He said the U.S. government. They built the buildings on the Mexican side. Now, I think there's a lot of dynamics there, because how many buildings we getting built in the ghetto? Let's talk about it. I think for us, we don't understand that boot to neck has created not only familial destruction, but it's also been a situation where we literally went from being slaves that created more wealth than the country had in total to then being part of Jim Crow, where we were a contagion to wealth. Let me explain that again. A contagion to wealth. Our presence destroyed wealth. That means you can't build no social networks. That means you can't get no gifts. If I'm a rich man, why would I give you wealth if it disappears in your hand? You know, what's your thoughts on that, caller? And I'll let you go.
I mean, us being a contagion, you know, in many ways, I began to think about the last couple of years, you know, how integration kind of destroyed what little upward mobility we had, because it diluted the efforts of those of us that could pull together and were able to at least survive under white supremacy.
Thank you so much, caller. Let me try to get this last little question into Chuck. I appreciate you calling in. So, Chuck, look, this is the last question, but let's talk solutions. You know, you got Ocasio-Cortez says something that we think is just so you know, never could happen, but it's been here before. High taxation for the rich. You know, I've shown y'all the chart before. I'm gonna pull it up again on the actual YouTube. You know, when we look at America and during the Depression, the top 0.1% had the same amount of wealth as the bottom 90. Over the course of the years from the Depression until now, you saw a peak in the 1980s, before Reagan is elected, where the bottom 90 was taking home almost 40% of the wealth, and the top 0.1 was only taking home 7%. That's taxation at work. By the time you get to now, we now cross again, where again the bottom 90 and the top 0.1 both have about 22% of the wealth, familial wealth. So the small number of families, including the Oscar Mayers, have as much wealth as the bottom 90 of America again. And I guess taxation 70%, that I don't see a problem with that. I don't see it as something we shouldn't be asking for. Reparations is another one. 40 acres and a mule in the 21st century. Go look it up. My good friend, Professor William Darity, leading intergenerational economist. Go read Black Wealth, White Wealth, Thomas Shapiro. Support the works of Dark Hamilton. What I feel is that reparations is the discussion of the moment for Black Americans and for America at large, and we need to deal with these things. So solution-wise, what do you think?
Well, I would just put together what you said. I actually, you know, think restoring the progressive tax system, which would, and I would add to that a wealth tax, a tax on wealth over 10 million, progressive, you know, billionaires paying a higher rate, and have that portion, a large portion of that, fund the debt, if you will, the what Randall Robinson called the debt, fund reparations, fund both, you know, cash payments, wealth building initiatives, the first time home buyer loan programs, educational institutions, monuments, memorials. You know, look at how reparations has been done around the world, and do it here in the United States. And you know, I even just think about I have an uncle who is not from the wealthy side of my family. He got a 40-year, 1% fixed-rate mortgage in 1949 to buy a farm outside Lime, Ohio. And that became the foundation of his prosperity. Why wouldn't we do that for anyone who was excluded from mortgages by virtue of racial discrimination? So I think taxing the wealth, which, by the way, is mostly white wealth, and funding, you know, the reparations, you said it is the issue that facing our country now, and we're going to remain in kind of a state of arrested development as a society if we keep perpetuating this mythology of deservedness. You know, everybody's where they deserve to be because of their hard work, and not look at the historic and systemic forces that have blocked wealth and extracted wealth from black communities. And it's so that's where, as a white person, I feel like it's part of our just facing the facts, facing history, facing the reality, and trying to move our society to a place of healing and reconciliation. We have to pay the debt. It's like you and I are playing poker with a group of people, and then we discover an hour into the game that we were playing with a stacked deck, and some of us got extra cards and some of us don't. Okay, we're going to throw out that old deck and we're going to start over. We're going to play a fair game. But what do we do about the fact that, you know, my pile of chips is way bigger than your pile of chips?
You know, let me say this, Chuck. You know, I'm going to say this, and I want you to talk to us about your book a little bit. Give me a minute and a half, 2 minutes on the book, Born on Third Base. But I think it's actually a little bit worse. You know, I was talking to Byron Allen, billionaire Byron Allen, about the Weather Channel, and one of the things that he brought up was the foot race, because that's what it sounds like. My problem with that analogy is that, no, black people were the cards themselves. So now the cards are worn down, and it's like you're saying to the cards, play a game. And so, like, I think it does a disservice to even call us a player. And I fundamentally believe this, not in the sense of genetics, not in the sense of social judgment of black folks, but understanding what black folks were. We were the tools to create white wealth. And we remain the tools today through mass incarceration. We remain the tools through subprimes. We remain the tools through so many different ways. And I think that fundamentally that it's hard to see us as the worn down shoes in the race, not another racer when we talk about a lead in the race. You know what I'm saying? But look, Chuck, I appreciate you coming on. Can you please give us a minute and a half on your book, Born on Third Base? I think that is a powerful read, and I just want to make sure my audience gets a chance to hear about it.
Well, point well taken there. I hate that level playing field running race stuff anyway. You know, it's so far from. So I think your statement about the tools, and I should just say, I wrote this book, Born on Third Base, which is a book about advantage. It's a book about my own life experience, but it's also drawing on a lot of people's stories and research on what does advantage look like? What does white advantage look like? How does it work? How does it work over generations in families? How do white families build wealth? And part of my goal is to disrupt these narratives. You know, a lot of people will hear the data about the racial wealth divide, about inequality in general, and they have a powerful story, which is, hey, you know, the way things are is a reflection of effort and deservedness. And you've heard it, and I've heard it. And my question is, how do you change or disrupt that mythology? And so that's what Born on Third Base has been doing. And for 2 years, I've kind of been on the road. And even last night, I spoke to this, you know, kind of wealthy white suburban church group where, you know, I asked people, okay, talk about how does advantage work in your life? It's not a question, people, what help did you get? How did the government help you? How did your family help you? How did a system of white supremacy help you in building your own wealth? And really begin to unpack and own and tell true stories of how advantage works. So it feels like that's a piece of the puzzle that we need to put into this conversation.
Thank you so much. I know my audience appreciated it. I know the audience on Dash Radio, Dash Talk X appreciated this. Again, pick up the report, Dreams Deferred, How Enriching the 1% Widens the Racial Wealth Divide, covered by Fortune, covered by all kind of sites all across the web, covered by Your Web, Black News Site. What I want to say is go to tonetalks.org, subscribe and donate, share this video. I'm going to have it up on YouTube as well. Let's get this discussion going. It's also available on iTunes. You can support my Patreon at Patreon/Tone Talks. We're going to be in West Louisville at the West Louisville Forum on February 6th. Me and Yvette Carnell from Breaking Brown, supporting Dr. Kevin Cosby, supporting the Angela Project, supporting St. Stephen's Church and Simmons College. And what we're going to be talking about is philanthropic redlining, this new concept of how, as a result of tax reform, now we're asking white wealthy people to choose how they're going to donate, and they're doing all kind of funny stuff with that. But thank you so much for tuning in. Please share this, and we'll be back. Tone Talks out.